Call the November 29th, 2018 Town of Northwood Planning Board meeting to order at 6:32. Present, Hal Kreider, Betty Smith, Vice Chair Lee Baldwin, Chair Bob Strobel. We're missing one of our staffers. She is here? Okay. Town Planner, Board Secretary, and Town Board Administrator is somewhere in the building. We have minutes of November 8th. And I would entertain a motion for such.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. B. Smith, second by Ms. Hal Kreider. Discussion. Anybody have anything? Substantive? Okay.
You, maybe it's for a later discussion, but we accepted the CIP, that you'd edit it.
Yes.
Did you send out a revised copy?
No, I did not.
Okay, that's, okay.
It's been a week.
Well,
Yes,
I just was curious if I missed it.
Or two.
I did not. Yes, it's been two. It's been 2 weeks. That.
Hey, you got your cherries, you're all set.
I was just going to do that. I was going to turn it into you like that.
Oh, so these are directional. Okay.
Yes.
It's very directional.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion on the minutes, all those in favor of the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, those abstaining. Okay. We have case 1813, Ledgewood Realty Trust. Gentlemen.
Excuse me.
Okay. The board's had a chance to look at this for a bit. And we have not yet brought it up for completeness.
Right.
So we are not open at this point, but I haven't seen anything I thought that was missing significance. There's town staff the same. Where we have
so
some things to deal with.
Do all of you have a copy of the staff report?
Yep.
I didn't print it.
So to my knowledge, we haven't received anything apart from the revised plans for ZBA because the applicant was proposing to change up some of their wetland crossings. To my knowledge, we haven't received any other materials since the last time I passed around the staff report, so I haven't made any changes. For me, the biggest concern is that this is an excavation, and we do not have all of the materials that would be required for an excavation permit. As long as the applicant is aware that they need an excavation permit from this board, I guess it doesn't have to happen simultaneously with site plan approval. They can come back and get that permit at a later time, but they can't expand that excavation until they have that permit. There are 7 requested waivers for this one. So some of those will impact materials that are submitted. So we would want to at least talk about those tonight probably, so the applicant would have as much lead time to prepare and submit those.
Right.
If waivers are not granted. But other than those items, I don't have any concerns about completeness.
Okay. How would be the appropriate format to bring that up, the question of the application, or the excavation permit with the application? Can we do that outside of opening the case? Just crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
I think that would just be something that if we didn't have it, we would require it as a condition of approval. We're not able to not find an application complete as a result of state permits.
Right.
And I think the excavation permit is kind of a weird one, that it's something that is covered by RSA 155E, but the permitting authority is you.
Right.
So I would say, especially for completeness purposes, I
Okay.
probably wouldn't recommend holding it up.
Okay. Well, I wasn't thinking of holding it up. I think it was more along the lines of having the discussion with the applicant about, do you want to have discussion of both together at the same time, or do you want to do site plan?
The final result would end up being the same,
Okay.
because if we didn't have them simultaneously, my recommendation would be that this board require it as a condition of approval for the site plan,
Right.
which would mean we would have it before you sign the plan anyway.
Right.
So the same sequence of
Yeah.
events would happen.
Yeah, I understand that part. It was more the idea of that if we made changes to the site plan, or the applicant made changes to the site plan that would affect the excavation permit, what I'm trying to avoid is the latter, where we approve potentially the site plan with a condition of the excavation permit coming in, and then something happens to the excavation permit that requires a site plan change, which means we'd have
I
to open
think
up.
the biggest thing that we don't have right now is the reclamation plan
Okay.
as part of that. So I wouldn't see anything coming from this board that would be a particular concern. Alteration of terrain from the state would be a separate issue.
Yep.
But I wouldn't foresee any substantial change coming out of this board looking at the excavation permit that you probably couldn't get from a site plan discussion anyway.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Motion for, well, the discussion comes up with completeness. We don't have a reclamation plan with the application.
On that particular point, Bob, is the reclamation plan part of the
That's part of the excavation permit materials. So
Right.
for straight site plan approval, that's not something we have to have.
Okay, that's
But before excavation starts, that is something we would need.
okay. And then the related question is, like in the previous work that they did, there was some things where we had to say, okay, we need to put some money aside to make sure this gets done. Where does that fall into the sequence of events? Is that also part of the excavation plan?
It's the reclamation.
Okay, so that is part of which
Well,
is part of the excavation.
If there were bonding or escrow payments that were required, those could probably be attached to either the site plan or the
Does
excavation
not matter,
permit.
is what you're saying.
They would both, based on my understanding of the statute, allow you to require that as part of approval.
Okay.
So it sounds like, given the need for reclamation plans, need for an excavation, or reclamation plan and an excavation permit, we're still okay opening this without problem, because we know those need to come, and the applicant knows that they're coming
They're nodding, so.
in. Yeah.
I've been watching you. And you're-
This is sort of like talking
bobblehead
underneath your nose. It is the case. I'm sorry about that, but. So I'd entertain a motion for completeness.
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
I was waiting for you to do it, because you just jump right in there and you're being polite tonight. Oh, you're eating raisins, okay.
Okay. Motion to find the application 18-13 complete by Ms. B. Smith, second by Mr. Kreider. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, those abstaining. Okay, so we're on the clock. I will open case 18-13, Ledgewood Realty Trust, Millstone Realty Trust.
Okay.
I'll say it for the sake of consistency. If there are any members of the public or in a butter, when I read your name, please raise your hand and speak so that I know you're here. Hopefully, I won't hear Eddie based on the fact that there is no one member of the public here, but you never know what's going to happen. Peter and Thomas Johnson of Piermont, New York. You're listed as an abut.
Excuse me?
You're listed on the abutters list, but that's okay. Are you an abutter as well as the owner?
I think because it's
It's
Ledgewood and
because it's
Millstone.
trust.
It's two different trusts.
multiple, Yeah.
There's
okay.
multiple parcels, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, note you're here.
Thank you.
I think that's the first time I've seen that, that's why. Public Service of New Hampshire, Samuel Johnson Trust of Northwood, Mark Buchanan of Northwood, James Homestead LLC of Wisconsin, another Samuel Johnson of Northwood, Mathis Family Limited Partners of Deerfield, Jacob Morissette of Stratford, Giles Revocable Trust of 1992 at Portsmouth, Co-Brown Northwood Academy, Northwood Power Equipment, Christopher and Angela Garland of Northwood, Peter and Thomas Johnson of Piermont, Northwood Oil Company, Robert and Melinda McElhaney, Stephen of Northwood, Stephen Anthony of Northwood, Jeffrey Revocable Trust of Northwood. Okay. Note that no butters are present.
Just like one.
Well, he has a dual role tonight. Okay. Just for the record, Mr. Kreider and I went along with the ZBA site walk 2 weeks ago. Well,
I don't remember. It was a Saturday.
it was a Saturday.
It was 2 weeks
Yeah, it
ago.
was 2 weeks ago. Which was, I found, very informative.
Yeah, it was good.
But we were,
Was it
members of the
Doug?
public was not a public, it was not
Doug
as
is- yeah, it went-
planning board site.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, why don't you give us an introduction and what you want to do?
Before we do that,
Sure.
we have an application for a site plan. Is there actually an application form for an excavation permit?
Do you have a separate form? So we would just want all of the materials that are required by 155B, we wouldn't have a form.
Okay. Which we planned on doing, so I just didn't know. Just,
I think we
Just,
developed one, but I don't know if we actually used it last time we were here, years ago, but
I will look in Elaine's
yeah.
portfolio of info.
what I do is I'll just kind of briefly go over.
Sure.
this. I think people sort of know what it is.
Mhm.
This is all the property that David has. This is Route 4, and this area right here is where his existing office, excavation, storage, crushing, everything's going on right there. And the plan is to get this finished up, flattened off, and have sales here, and really nothing else. And have the excavation and the crushing and the stockpiling in the back in this area, so that there would be stockpiles out here for sales, and as the stockpile goes down, We go in the back room, get some material, put it in the pile, and sell it. And it's really this same operation. It's just that what is happening right here in the back will happen here in the back, and this will be all sales. And so currently there is a road that comes from the site and connects onto this other road that comes out by the tractor sales place. And it goes down through here, crosses a wetland there, crosses a wetland here, and it comes up into the power line, and it crosses this wetland and this wetland. They just drive in the water and nobody does anything. So we need to access this back property, and so what we were proposing to do was to actually build a bridge here, and two bridges here to carry the traffic of the trucks. And there's not going to be any traffic except for David's trucks and his employees out here bringing the material out to the front. And the reason we're doing that is so that we don't have an impact on the wet, and we just think it's the right thing to do. In the back, this is the public service power line that goes through here. And we have this broken into three areas. This is area A, this is area B, and this is area C. This dark line is not because it's any different, it's because someone used the wrong pen weight when they plotted this and it came out darker and we didn't have a chance to fix it. So, the plan is to temporarily use the existing road in this area to build this bridge and this bridge, and then start to work out here to in area A. While we're doing that, we would come back and work on this bridge. I mean, we can drive back and forth on the existing road. This area right here is, we originally thought about just fixing the road, but it's pretty narrow, and we actually could use some elevation assistance getting up this hill and getting up this hill. So our plan is to build a bridge across this wet and have it, it's probably going to be 5-6 feet above the ground. And so that this is actually a big pond. When I first started working on this property, it wasn't a pond, there was actually trees out there, but I think the beavers are out here and they flooded this one. And drainage from this area comes down through and goes this way, and drainage from this area goes down through here and goes out into the pond. So we would build this larger crossing, this smaller crossing, and this crossing, sort of simultaneously with getting started in area A. Now the plan is to, when we're all done with this, is to not turn it into industrial parks. The plan is to put it back the way it is and leave it there. So we have, this is our initial work area, or our work area for quite a while. In that area will be a little office like he has out front, a place for some employees to park their cars, crushing equipment, some stockpiling, and we would take material out of here initially and then work into this space to here and around to here. We have some wetlands out here, the shaded areas. We have a minimum of 100-foot setback from those wetlands with our excavation area, which will be undisturbed. In this area, when we first start, we won't work on the whole area, but we're going to work on a good part of it. These round circles over here are stockpiles. And what the plan is to cut the trees, chip the trees or cut the trees or just get rid of the trees out of here. To take the stumps out and put them in a pile. Then to take off what we call the organic layer, which is that forest litter and rotten stuff that has now become topsoil. And that would go in a pile by itself. And then we have what's called the AB horizon, and which is organic mixed with some mineral and some organic mixed with a little more mineral, so it becomes less organic. And that would go in a pile. And then what we have left is till. This is ground up stone, granite from when there was a glacier here, and that would get put in another pile. And then we would start to excavate rock out of here. The only thing that we want to take out of here is rock. And we're not going to take the rest of the stuff out of here. It's going to stay out here. And we have a phasing plan. And once we get, this would be the first phase, and then this would be sort of the second phase. And when this is all excavated out, we would go out here and we would start in area B. And we have a line, which is like right there. When we get to this line, reclamation area 1, which is here, and reclamation area 2, which comes up into here, would be reclaimed. So that we would take that material, spread out that till, put the AB horizon back on top of it, put the organic stuff on top of it, and take our direct proportional share of the stumps and everything else and put that on top of it and just leave it. And we're not going to plant Christmas trees. We're just going to leave it there so that in no time, the birch trees will come first and little oak trees will come next, and it'll turn into what it is today. And so we're trying to make it so that when we get done, it looks like what it is today. The plan is to excavate to these points, and the depth at the lowest point is going to be 4 feet. This area will be flat. The highest, or the shortest phase, let's say that, the shortest difference in elevation from the abutting land to the floor of this pit will be 4 feet. There are other places where it'll be higher because the land continues to slope off, and we can't chase it across the power line. So we'll have this flat area, which will be eventually totally reclaimed. Continuing with the phasing, once we get this area almost, and you can see the stockpiles for this area, once we have this area almost reclaimed, we'll start over here. And when this area gets finished, everything except for this work area will be reclaimed over here and over here. So we'll have this work area, and then we'll have area C to work on. And when area C is done, this will get reclaimed, and this will get reclaimed, and we'll go out there, and that'll be the end of it. The way we're going to excavate here is we're going to create a face, and Dave has to comply with mining regulations. We have a typical section in the plans, what a soil slope would look like, and it goes up 20 feet, and then it has a 6 or 8 foot shelf on it. It goes up 20 feet more at a 2-to-1 slope. 2-to-1 slope is when you see the slope on the side of an interstate highway, and it's the steep slope, that's the 2-to-1 slope. It's the places where on the highway, on the interstate highway, they have guardrail because they have to have it there. And so this would be excavated level, and when they blast to remove the rock, they're going to overblast. They're going to drill, if they go into elevation 100, they'll drill to elevation 96. And they're only going to excavate to elevation 100 because we want to leave 4 feet of broken rock there. And the reason we want to do that is so that rain that lands on this site will stay on this site, soak down into the rock, and eventually percolate into the stone, the bedrock that's underneath. And once we put the soil back on and the organic layer back on and all that stuff, it'll be the water will be able to soak down through those layers of replaced material and into that stone layer and act more like an upland area. So we didn't want this to be sitting on a floor of rock and having it fill up with water. So we're trying to keep the water at bay by staying above it, not excavating down to it.
Yes, the overblasting is for all 3 pits.
All 3, yeah. And we've talked to the DES people about our AOT permit, and they're like, if you keep this low and you overblast like that and you put it back, the review's going to be pretty simple. We aren't going to talk too much about it. We work on a lot of gravel pits, and we do the same thing where we keep the gravel pit lower than the surrounding ground so any water stays in the gravel pit. And they actually will renew permits every 5 years and just keep doing it. So we will have to renew our AOT permit out here. So.
I realize you probably won't have estimates of the amount of material that you're going to pull off stumps and AB.
Yeah.
You describe them. If in the reclamation, and I realize you don't have a reclamation plan yet, you run short. Well, let me rephrase that. One of the things we don't have say over the reclamation. Do we have say over the yeah, we have say over the reclamation plan, or is that state?
You would be able to review the reclamation
Okay.
plan, but that would be part of the excavation permit,
Right.
not necessarily the site plan.
Okay.
Let me interrupt you and tell you
Sure.
what the answer is. What we were looking to do was to put back exactly what we took out. And so if we took out 2 feet of till and 1 foot of AB horizon and 4 inches of organic and some stumps, that's what we want to put back in.
Okay.
So what we weren't looking to do was to put on 8 inches of topsoil and grass seed, and that's not what we're trying to do.
The reason I asked was that, I don't know if anybody else noticed, I'm sure you were aware of it, there is a good bit of exposed ledge
Mm-hmm.
that's already there.
Right.
So,
But it's also vertical, and we talk about it in the office and say, no, by the time we flatten that, all those vertical areas are going to give us more material in a small flat area.
Okay.
So that I think we're going to be in pretty good shape, actually.
Okay.
So,
just
yeah.
like to get the ideas before, while I'm thinking about this. So.
Yeah. So that's really what we're doing, and we read in the and we went through and we've actually made most of the changes to the plans. Although I just wanted to talk about the list of comments, and so we could.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about widening the road out to it's 16 feet of travelway and 2-foot shoulders, and so we're going to do that. One thing we did talk about too is, and I think it works okay, is we were going to keep the bridges 16 feet between the rails, which lines up with our 16-foot 2 lanes. We do a lot of bridges for municipalities, and we build a lot of 1-lane bridges. It's surprising how many there are, and we make them. Sometimes they're 13 feet wide. We get from 16 to 18 feet, but because there's no public out here, and it's not people going, shopping and people delivering stuff. It's just trucks going back and forth. And there are going to be times when there's not going to be trucks for days out there, because once they fill this up, there's no purpose in hauling material from the back to the front. It's done, it's filled up. And then they would start hauling some more material. So we wanted to keep the bridges 16 feet between the rails, so that basically, if there was a fog line on the edge of this road, it would line up with the rail. And because these bridges are pretty short, if you had, you're trying to move much material and you had 2 trucks, they certainly, because they're employees and they are trained to do whatever you're supposed to do, you just stop and you wait for the other guy to go by, so you don't have to have two big dump trucks on the bridge at the same time. So we're just trying to save some money because building bridges is not,
Do you have space for, in the vicinity of the bridge, one side or the other, for two trucks to pass?
yeah, what we would do is, we had talked about, like, at a bridge, making a pull-off.
Okay.
So that a guy could pull his truck basically off, almost off the road, and wait for the other truck to go by, and then he'd go ahead. So,
Just out of curiosity, how many trucks do you have?
3
Three?
big ones, bigger ones.
Bigger, yeah, the bigger ones.
But there'll be off-road trucks
Yeah, sure.
transporting from back to front, so
Right.
number will vary.
so I guess we, that was a comment about the width of the road, and we would do that. There's no other utilities out here. There wouldn't even be electricity because we would just use solar electricity, solar light. The crusher runs on diesel, and there'd be we haven't picked it, but we're going to put a gate here someplace so people can't get out there. So,
Okay.
good place to put the gate is at the end of the bridge. Then it's like you're going to have to drive in the ditch to get out there. So that's really what we're doing. It's it's actually pretty straightforward. Right now he used to have a guy come and do crushing. He's doing his own crushing now. He has main drilling and blasting come and do the blasting, and they certainly know how to do that. And then he crushes it up and stockpiles it and hauls it out to the front. So it started off as a way to use this land that it's turned into a business of selling material, and he sold quite a bit of it. So what I'd like to do, if everybody's okay with that little overview, is we had some waivers in the application, which I'd like to just talk about. Because,
Sure.
Do we want to ask some questions first, or do we
Sure.
want to go through the
Yeah.
waivers first? Your preference?
Yeah, let's ask questions. Go ahead.
So, in terms of area A, B, and C, and your plan on doing it in phases, approximately how much will be disturbed and not reclaimed, like the maximum at any given time?
well, starting off, we need this area to work in to bring material to crush it, to stockpile it and move it out. We have this area where we calculated how much material we thought we were going to take off here, and we made piles, and we made piles that were 2-to-1 slope piles, and it initially everything's going to have grass growing on it because it's going to be sitting there for a while, so we don't want it blowing away.
Right.
So we're initially going to have this area, and then it's going to be, these stockpiles will be here, and then after we get started a little bit, we'll move these piles over here. So we're going to do more clearing and more grubbing and put that, and we're going to be excavating right here. So the plan was to have this area,
The whole area excavated?
the whole area excavated until we got to here. And then we're going to reclaim this portion, and we're going to reclaim this portion.
So it sounds like it's area A
Yeah,
plus a portion of area B.
yeah.
Any idea acres of that?
A is 13 acres, and B is 10. But this is like 2 acres out here. Because we have to get started,
Okay, so
These
about
are-
15 acres will be disturbed at the
at
maximum.
the maximum, yeah. And then we're going to, you can see that curved line right there.
Yeah,
And
which
this-
drawing are you working from? Because I didn't want to rustle the papers, but it's not this one, right? Because I'm not seeing some of the stuff.
Yeah,
you're
some of the
talking
stuff isn't on there.
Yeah, we may have,
Which is,
yeah. I think it's on
about. Or is it
the
on
big
one-
set.
Is it on, okay.
Yeah, it's on the big set. Because if I look on page 7,
Page 7,
7 of X,
7, sheet 7.
yeah, there's a square blocky.
Sheet 7.
7.
7 of X.
Whoa. My sheet 7 doesn't look the same as yours.
Yeah, it's in the very back. Keep going past sheet 7, you go to the 7 of X.
Oh,
Yeah.
not that 7.
Yes.
Yeah, the other side.
The other 7.
Actually, it's not that one either.
Yeah, it is, right there.
7 of X?
Yeah, it's right there, the
Oh,
block.
okay, it's a detail.
Yeah, the
Sorry,
block, and
not
there's a
going
blocky line. If you see this kind of square line here,
Mhm.
that's a phase line.
Okay,
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. Yep.
So we worked on the phasing quite a bit because, you know, it's easy to draw phase lines on, and then when Dave gets out, he's like, you know, I can't do this because it doesn't fit, you know. So we've been pretty careful about how to do this.
Good.
what are the heavy dotted lines here, please?
That's the phase line. They look like squares.
Oh.
Yes, the one, that's exactly.
Oh,
what
in
the
terms
plan
of restoration, okay.
Yeah, restoration phase lines. Yeah,
Actually, they kind of look like rectangles.
yeah, they're little blocky rectangles. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you got some maneuvering and stuff to do initially just to get some space to work.
Yeah, you're gonna make some workspace out there, and it's like,
You mentioned a 2-to-1 slope. Where are those?
well, in places where there's soil, if we have ledge, I think on your other one, it's vertical. Yeah, it wasn't.
No, I mean, are those typically like the edges?
Yeah.
Boundaries?
Yeah, these edges, like along here,
Okay.
those would be either, they're 1 to 3, which means for every foot of distance, it goes up 3 feet, or they're 2 to 1, which means for every 2 feet, it goes up 1 feet. And there's a detail in here that says, if it's soil, we'll go with that 2 to 1 slope, and then we're gonna have a shelf, 20 feet high, then we'll go up 20 more feet and have another shelf. And,
If it's ledge, you can do the other.
say again,
If it's rock, you can do the,
they'll make it, it's almost vertical, it's not quite vertical. And if it's slope, we'll leave it just as soil. If it's ledge, we gotta put a fence on top of it. We don't like doing that, but, because I don't need some snowmobile to go,
over the top.
yeah. And it's just it's not to keep people out, it's just so that someone doesn't fall over the edge, you know, unknowingly, you know.
So when, I don't know if this is a
And
question for.
We've graded this like it's all 2 to 1,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
But if we found a place, we wouldn't lay the ledge back at 2 to 1, we would just cut it off vertically. But then we have to put the fence on top of it.
And I guess I'm,
Like my front pit,
right,
basically.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah, he wasn't too far into it and realized it was gonna be ledge and put the fence up, so. It was, first time he blasted it, I think he had the fence up.
So,
And I guess I don't think we have any jurisdiction. Well, I don't know if we do or not, but I guess I'm questioning the idea of if you have ledge going vertically and having to put a fence at the top of it, when the idea is to reclaim it, or essentially let it go to, I'll use the creative term, disturb natural,
Sure,
when you're out in the middle of the woods.
right.
You know, I can understand the idea of wanting to get as much material out of there as you can. And if you're on a 1 to 3 slope, you said? For
1 on 3, yeah,
1 on 3,
yeah.
that would allow you, going vertically would not allow you to do that, but I guess I don't see the benefit of going vertical and putting a fence up the top as opposed to leaving it at a somewhat of a slope where you don't need a fence.
Mhm.
But
We'll talk about that, yeah.
I mean, in your front part, certainly you got a neighbor right there, and you're most likely to have human travel at that point. In the back, though, I am a little bit concerned with that, just
Yeah,
to have it.
I was gonna say sort of the same thing. I'm a little bit concerned about, not the first several years, but
Right. Eventually, when
eventually the fence
your
is down.
grandkids inherit this.
I mean, is there more difficulty involved in leaving it at a different slope?
I mean, we could do that. What we would probably do is blast it straight, because blasting on a slope has its
Okay.
issues.
Sure.
But we could take junk
Just taper it.
material, if we end up with too much fines,
Mhm.
we could just make a slope out of it, so. Because what we really want is the rock, and when you're processing, you end up with all this, it's sort of like, fine material. You don't get rid of so much of it, and then it's like, when are we gonna do with it? So as you were talking about it, I was thinking, well, that might be a place to get rid of that stuff, because it is a waste product.
Well, I hate to see something, especially, I don't want to put words in Dave's mouth, but he or maybe Doug, somebody mentioned maybe this gets conserved later on. And if we're just going to leave it, sort of natural in, let's try this word, perpetuity.
Mhm.
Very good.
Thank you.
Amazed.
My thought process is maybe it's better to end up with something that you don't have to worry about.
Having the fence on it.
Yeah,
Sure.
and nowadays I think the snowmobiles, maybe the 3-to-1 slope, isn't something they necessarily go down, but it might not be disastrous
Be
if they
killed on, yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm throwing that out as a thought, but
If-
that would be my concern. Like when you
I think,
mentioned
wouldn't it
fences.
be, some of them slope, cuts in the back are relatively tall. They are benched.
Mhm.
It'd
And
be
that
a-
might be
It'd be an extraordinary amount of material after you took it all out to
to
feather it back into a,
why don't we,
I think
Yeah,
it's
let's not belabor the
yeah,
point. Think
not
about it a
believe
little
the
bit.
point,
and
it's something to
then-
think about. I would have less concern if the PSNH right-of-way was not there,
Mhm.
because if it's essentially all woods and no access to
Right.
this, you're essentially, you're gonna take a risk from it, but because we know it's a traveled way
Sure.
to begin with, and all of a sudden it's open for the first 20, 30 years, however long it takes to get reclamation, that's the period of time where you're most likely to have access.
Well, I don't know what the right answer is, but it's something maybe to think about.
Yep.
Because the fence, I hate to see us where we have to say, oh, you need to put money aside to keep maintaining the fence in perpetuity, or, stuff like that. I'm trying to avoid, because if we create that sort of hazard, what are you gonna do 100 years from now? Well, 50 years from now. So just think about it a little bit, and maybe
Yep.
be a little creative.
Can I jump in here for a second? Fences and the mobile office are structures, so I think, obviously some determinations about whether a fence needs to go at the top aren't going to be made until we get to the point of actually blasting and reclaiming. Just from a site plan perspective, I think if we could add some sort of a note to that effect, that if deemed necessary as part of reclamation, fencing would be installed around the perimeter of the identified excavation area, a mobile office, that it's a temporary building, will be placed at various locations within the excavation area as needed depending on work. I think having notes to that effect would solve any concerns over having to change the site plan every time you move that mobile office.
Yeah, okay.
Can we put on your original, we have saying mobile office in this area, or locations for it? I believe it was
But
set,
really,
yeah.
I mean,
This
we
is
wouldn't
where
hold them to that.
it
would we?
was supposed to be that, there'd be parking, crushing, office. Once he gets going with this, the office probably is gonna move for a long time,
Yeah, sure.
because we're
Okay.
gonna be bringing material, crushing it, and, and if you're working out here, we don't need an office out here, we just need,
You're still bringing all of the material back to the office and the crusher.
Yeah.
But in this case, the office isn't permanent, and do we really care exactly where it's located? I mean, is there planning board issues that we would have?
I think we could just define,
I think as long as there was an envelope like he just described, and we're saying the mobile office is going to be somewhere in this envelope, I think that would be.
temporary structures to be located within this area, or,
And I don't mind doing that either, because I don't need somebody that, doesn't like us coming in and saying, well, you can't have your office, it has to be exactly right here, or,
Well, that's why I was sort of
Yeah.
getting at, because you might get there and find you need to shuffle over a little
Sure.
bit.
I'm sure it's gonna, because matter of fact, the office he has is movable, because that was the reason, because we didn't really know how it was gonna work, so.
I got one other question that,
Sure.
but it's maybe more for you. I don't know what the workplace regulations and stuff are relative to emergency access and things like that, but I assume that's beyond our purview. I just don't know, like, what's the, like the, I don't know, what's the federal standard for being able to rescue workers and stuff?
OSHA kind of things.
Yeah, so maybe, just make sure we're what's the word?
Compliant?
Compliant with that, because I don't know that we really care how wide the road is as long as it serves that purpose. But I think we need to make sure that there's that we don't approve something that
Thing is-
doesn't meet the safety standard.
I think so. We aren't necessarily responsible for implementing OSHA standards or anything like that. The sort of level of oversight that I suggested in the staff report was this is more private road than driveway, considering how many parcels it's interacting with. And the Board of Selectmen, my understanding is they typically require the emergency lane standards, improvements to emergency lane standards for things that are constructed on those roads.
That's if you're living there though, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's room for discussion, but you certainly have, it is your purview to decide whether there is safe access. And if there is a standard that you are agreeing to for safe access, maybe you don't need a full two-way travel lane, considering the amount of traffic. Periodic pull-offs might be sufficient. But the standard that you're reviewing to is, at the very least, is there safe access out back?
Yeah, but I think your point or my question would be, yeah, we need to make sure there's safe access, but what would be that standard that we would ask them to follow?
Well, to me, that would be up to exactly what James says, is there safe access?
Yeah, who defines that though?
We don't have
In
purview over
part,
private roads, though.
comments from the emergency services would be really helpful with that. That if for some reason the woods caught back there and they needed to get a truck out there, or
That's what I was-
somebody was injured and they needed to get an ambulance out there.
That would be exactly my two criteria, is getting an ambulance out to the stockpile site on Pit A, or a brush fire, and you need a pumper truck to pull off one of the wetlands.
Okay,
If
and
need-
we
if-
define those standards, or does OSHA, or who defines that standard?
So the two ways that you could go about doing that, One would just be if we haven't gotten comments, or if the comments have been no comment from police and fire when we forwarded this application. You could always reach back out and just say, hey, can you give us some sort of an explanation about how this would work, and whether this would work for you. Give us some more details. The other option would be asking them to show on a plan maneuverability for probably the pumper truck as being the biggest thing they need to get back out there.
I don't bring it up because I just feel like I don't really know what to say or what is appropriate, and that's why I was asking, are there industry standards, are there OSHA standards, are there something that can help
Yep.
us so that we don't feel like, oh, we've left
Yeah,
this uncovered or
yeah. Let me just speak to that a little bit.
Guidelines.
The people that are going to oversee this from a regulatory standpoint is going to be the DES people as far as erosion.
yeah.
The OSHA people as far as equipment, and if he's got a crusher, you can't have so a guy can stick his hand in it.
Right, yeah.
And
That's
as
OSHA.
far as the excavation part, it's the mining people, and they're going to be concerned about the height of a slope, the width of the road, the width and durability and ability to keep a truck on the bridge and when it tries to go off the bridge. Those are things that they come looking for, and they look pretty hard because
That's the mining.
that's the
Right.
mining guys, yeah.
That's
And
above and beyond us.
yeah,
Yeah,
But
so,
yeah, we
so
want
we can
to-
just say needs to be per their standards.
yeah. Yes.
Mm,
And it,
yeah,
and as a practical matter, if he doesn't follow the standards, he's not going to be in business.
yeah, right.
Because they'll put him out of business. you know.
Exactly.
They visit my site usually, at least once a year, usually twice a year.
Well, like I say, I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah,
I mean, I've worked in manufacturing facilities where, there's roads all over the place,
yeah,
but I don't know who defined
yeah.
how they should be.
I don't think there's any maximum road length. We have a site that we work on Hooksett for Boston Sand and Gravel, and their road is 3.8 miles long from one end to the
Well, I
other.
wasn't really thinking about that, but
And-
well, yours is like a mile. But no, I was more just,
Yeah,
just the general ability to get back and forth, and like you mentioned, you have some bridges,
yeah,
whatever those requirements are. I mean, I don't feel qualified to
Well, I think
weigh
we-
in on that, but if there's a set of standards, then let's make sure we delineate those standards.
I think that would be fire more than anybody else, or emergency services, to be able to
Yeah.
say. And some, I'll use the term common sense of, if there is a choke point like a bridge, well, you have a pull off within
Mhm.
sight where it's obvious that, yes, this is where you see somebody coming, this is where you can pull off before you get to a collision.
yeah,
Same kind of thing at the second road crossing. If you can't see around it, either make it wide enough so that you
Mhm.
have pull off, or make it wide enough that two can pass.
yeah. We have actually a profile of this road where we've made the sight distance work.
Sure.
Because there are places where, it's like this, and we're chopping the top off. 'Cause-
And maybe Dave or Bob can refresh my memory, but when we did the walk,
Mhm.
I have to tell you, I only remembered 3 bridges, not 4. So I remembered the one
We only saw 3.
down through the bottom, and, he talked about, how the ground comes in.
4.
That's the first one.
Yep.
Then
The first one was which we walked past.
we came up,
We had to back up
Yeah,
quite a
and
bit.
then we went into the woods on one side, into the woods on the other side, and he showed us 2 different places there.
Those are bridges 3 and 4.
Where's bridge number?
Two
Oh,
is,
just before that.
two is right at the
Two
marsh.
Right there.
That's one.
That's
Yeah.
when we backed up.
Then there's the
fir-
large one.
The first one was at the base of the wetlands.
Yeah. And
First,
then
we came to the wetlands. And then there's 2 where we walked into the woods,
Yeah,
just up the hill from the second one.
Oh, so the first one is way up front.
Yeah, it's way out
Yes.
front here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Okay,
Yes.
what I'd like to do, if we could, is, we had some waivers in our application, and if we could just talk about those, and I think there's one anyways that we're probably not gonna ask for. This is on my letter of September 4th, the first page.
Yep. Can we do, I think we could do with the easy ones first?
Let's deal with number 1 first.
Oh, let's do the easy ones first.
Okay.
I think we all on the same page,
Yeah,
or well, the lighting plan,
Oh, that's-
yeah.
I think we can, anybody have any comments on?
Are you working at night?
No.
There's no power out there, so it probably won't be many lights.
I think there's gonna be a little light on the building that.
Solar power.
Solar
He's
power?
solar powered, and he has a camera on his existing one, so he
Okay.
can see who comes in his yard at night, and that's probably gonna be it, so,
I would just say we'd ask that all the lights shine down.
yeah,
That's part of it,
I'm
to begin
I'm
with?
saying this for Joe.
yeah.
Yes,
He doesn't want to kill the night sky and,
That's not-
out there.
yes.
Yeah, this light I'm envisioning would be a light equivalent to what you'd have on your back porch,
Okay.
next to the door, so you can find your way out of the door if you have to, so.
Uh,
So,
Yep.
the
Is that
landscaping
one?
plan.
Yep, landscaping is the next one.
Yeah, landscaping plan is, we were looking to not actually do any landscaping. When we get done, we're gonna landscape this whole thing. We're gonna leave this
Reclaim it.
buffer. So again, reclaim
Reclaim
it,
it.
yeah.
Use, well,
But,
you can conflate
yeah,
landscaping and reclaiming, I would say.
yeah. So we just didn't see the purpose of putting, some rhododendrons up there. Trees. The erosion control plan, now, I don't really care about this one. This whole thing was put together by a number of people, and one person's idea was, why don't we just put the erosion control plan on the grading plan? I don't mind putting the erosion control plan on an erosion control plan, so we'll just withdraw number 5, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about number 6, the 1 to 50 foot?
Yeah, 1 in 50 foot. That plan is 200 scale.
Correct.
And we do have, in the set of plans, they are 1 inch equals 50 feet. But we have overall plans, and we're actually creating a plan that's gonna be this size, and then this size. And we like that not to be 50 scale, because it's okay to have the 50 scale in there if you wanna really look at the details. But when you're trying to see what's going on, you have to put all these pieces of paper together, and it's kind of unwieldy after a while.
Okay, so James, if we have details at 1 at 50 foot,
So with what we have right now, if the final plan set was going to continue to include sheets like that, I would say we don't need that waiver because
I was thinking as
we're
well.
showing the detail and we're showing the big picture. If you would prefer not to have that many sheets, because they're super zoomed in and there are, I think, at least 1 or 2 sheets in this plan set that really aren't doing anything at all, because they're showing like
Yeah.
a 20-foot sliver of a parcel.
Right.
You could choose to grant the waiver and have fewer sheets at a higher level view.
My only thought would be that if someone wanted, member of the public, whoever, a butter, wanted to look at the level of detail,
I don't mind making 50 scale sheets. I just wanted to be able to have sheets in there that weren't 50 scale.
exactly,
That's
yes,
fine.
and I completely understand that and agree with it. The idea would be, if you have them both,
Sure. Yeah, 'cause
the
if-
waiver is not needed.
Yeah, because if you go to one of these sheets, you can really see what's going on versus looking at a 100 scale, which is a little hard to see.
Right.
So I think the only thing that I would ask for with all of those detail sheets is if we could have like a reference plan that shows which sheet and how they're laid out. I think that would help.
Yeah. It's actually not in here yet, but there would be an index, and it'll say, you know, grading plan, sheets 1, 5, 11, 15, 16, erosion control plan, 2, 4, 9, 11. So, so when you're looking for an erosion control plan in this area, you can see it's on sheet 7, and then
Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
An index it would be.
Because I don't think there's any way around not having some at the bigger scale, because otherwise you can't really grasp.
can't figure out what
what's
you're
going
doing.
on.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yep.
And then the drainage analysis.
So before you move on, let me deal with that then. So we can withdraw
I would,
6 or
if the applicant's going to commit to having something at the 50 feet level in there, then I would say they can withdraw it. If you want to keep talking about what exactly that looks like, and maybe you only have certain detail insets at 50 feet, and don't cover the entire site, but the entire site is covered at 1 equals 100 or something like that, we can leave the waiver in there and keep talking about what exactly that's going to look like, and just do it as a partial waiver.
well, we'll just leave that in there for now, and
Yeah.
we can revisit at some point. It really does not impact a lot of the decisions that have to be made at this point in time.
They've already drawn everything to 50 scale.
Correct.
He's just asking to include larger scale drawings.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think you need a waiver to include something bigger because you're meeting the requirement.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
that's what I guess I was coming from. Okay.
The same way. I think we're talking the same language.
I didn't write that one. Someone else
Yeah,
did.
which is fine. It's a good request.
Number 7, the drainage analysis, we'll actually withdraw that because when the person wrote this, they were talking about the pit, but they weren't thinking about the road. So there are places outside the pit that will need drainage analysis and treatment, and so we don't want to have that in there.
Okay. Thank you, because I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have 2,
Yep.
auto and pedestrian circulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what we were going to do is, we have the box. We talked about on the 50 scale, putting a hypothetical, this is what the parking lot looks like, this is what the crusher looks like, and it's going to fill up the box sort of like this, knowing that it could change all around. So,
When you say the box, you mean the area where they're going to work in?
Yeah, the site plan today.
so what we were looking not to have is, you know, the truck has to come in and turn here and do this maneuver, because he might actually go this way instead of that way, so.
Can't we just list what's going to happen within the box and leave it up to them? I mean, do we really care which way the trucks go?
You wouldn't think so.
I think so.
I think we
as
just
long
want to
as
make
we-
sure we know what's happening in that area.
That is, we know that things can fit in that area, and
Yeah.
I'd assume you.
So I would say, if we did what the applicant suggested and had a conceptual to show everything can fit, and put a note, this is conceptual, configuration within will depend on actual site conditions once we
Yeah,
get
I
out
can write a
there.
pretty long note that,
I wouldn't be at all concerned about that.
Okay.
And I think the more we're talking about what the condition of that road is, I'm not as concerned. I certainly don't think it needs to be striped and have any of that stuff on there. I was just looking for something that's sort of indicating where are people actually going to be going on site. You know, the more we've discussed about materials are going to come from here to the office, from the office to the front. I think that's making that clearer.
And again, I guess when you're actually operating, it would fall under the jurisdiction of the mining folks. And, you know, so making sure there's room for equipment to get through in the right way and stuff, really, you have to abide by their rules. It's not something we would specify per se. We just care that there's...
Not the operations, but
Yeah.
you know, it would be, it's incumbent on you to make sure that in your plans, you can meet the mine,
Sure.
mine safety requirements. It's
Yeah.
more a matter, I think they are trying to follow the rules that we specify, and it would be foolish for us to say, yes, our site plan regulations require something that is in conflict with mine safety,
Right.
which
Yeah.
I don't think they would. I think my opinion would be, I would like to see a note on the plan saying exactly what James said or similar ideas. You know, show that you can fit the crusher, show that you can fit the, the remote office and parking area, and, the storage for truck or whatever you're gonna put out there,
Yeah.
leave out overnight or something to that effect. With it saying, subject to change.
Yeah.
Or conceptual, I think was a better word. And that would, the other part of from my perspective for the auto and pedestrian circulation plan is to include where the gate is, security gate.
Yeah, that'll be there.
And I would yeah, that would be enough, I would think.
I mean, we'll have things like a Knox box with a key in it, so if somebody does something on their snowmobile and the fire department wants to get out there, they can drive up there, so
Sure.
won't have to go chase David down someplace, so.
Is the idea of the gate in that the last truck comes in, closes it behind him, and you're closed for the evening?
Yeah, we need to do that, because
Okay.
otherwise you go home at 6 o'clock and somebody comes in at 8:30 in the middle of the
Exactly.
summer and starts drinking beer, so,
Okay. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Not that it would prevent them from taking their ATV up the
right.
thing, but more the idea of the obvious
Mhm.
storefront.
Actually, Fish and Game is pretty good about that.
Oh, good.
You know, if you put up a sign and you can't take an ATV on someone's property unless you get written permission. You can have it with you. And because we work for a lot of gravel companies, and what they do is they just call the Fish and Game guys, and they go out there and give them tickets. $200 if I drive into your ATV on someone else's gravel pit. It kind of gets around real quick. So
Good to know. Okay.
number one.
Yes. I think we did something similar the first time around. Did we not?
On this? No.
Well, I know there was a request for the filing fee to be reduced. Way back when we did
I think it
phase-
was
phase-
actually.
phase
Yeah.
one.
I don't believe so. I think they paid the full amount. I can go back and look.
I mean, it just, like I said, I know there was a request for it, but I don't know if we granted it or not. I can't
I
remember that
think
far back.
I may be wrong, but I thought when you started this, it was before the disturbed area fee.
When does this actually come due? I mean,
It's
I-
due
Before
now.
final approval, they won't get final approval without paying the fee,
okay,
whether it's
so
this fee or what you agree
is that a
to.
hard requirement that they have to be paid up front? I guess what I'm thinking about,
This phase.
knowing, what the town folks' reaction would be if we reduced the fee, I don't want to get skinned alive on that. And I can understand Dave would have a cash flow issue though, that amount of money. I guess it is a pretty large amount of money.
This is what I was going to suggest, because I know the planning board needs the money to buy new furniture,
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering,
Not that,
Use
it's
the
more,
microphones.
more
I had-
pay James's salary.
Yeah.
is there an option
Buy
though,
donuts every week.
where we can,
This is what I was thinking about doing, is having an amount that he pays initially, and then have it so that as we get through,
right,
maybe it's even phase one, when we say, you've, excavated a certain amount, then you have to write another check.
that's,
then-
yeah. 'Cause
And that way he's
his
paid,
cash flow is,
he's paying the bill with money he's making instead of just,
yeah, just up front and paying interest for years on it. And, yeah. I mean, is that an option we can consider?
I have zero experience with
Okay.
an agreement like that, and I would probably defer more to the town who would be responsible for implementing an agreement like that.
I think if it was, clearly spelled out that, when you draw a line, you go beyond this line, or you excavate, have a leveled off a certain area, that's it. You can't go any further until you pay the bill, and
It is actually part of the application. It is not
I understand.
something that's supposed to go beyond. With that said, also, the planning board recommended this fee, and it was adopted by the Board of Selectmen as part of their fee schedule. So I think if there is a waiver on that, I'd like to check first. I know that there's been extreme hardship cases of small amounts. The only one that I'm aware of that was actually that this planning board has granted a waiver for an application fee was for a in-home daycare where there was actually some information presented that the person was unable to pay the fee, but this was an income for them. Other than that, I'm not aware of any
I don't think we ever waived it, I think.
waived an application fee.
Yeah,
But with that said, I think maybe the thing to do would be that I would just check with the finance administrator or even potentially the Board of Selectmen to see if they have feedback where they adopted the fee after a public hearing based on a recommendation of the planning board. So that way,
Should we go see the
if you
selectmen?
are to, if you were to entertain waiving it, that at least that this didn't come as a surprise and then there'd be any
yes.
negative.
We weren't looking to waive it. I know it's on this waiver list. We were just looking to modify how we do it.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that, but I think even a modification, I think that
I would,
at least run it by,
Don't surprise
Them.
them.
right, to say.
I think
yeah,
it's
we-
better.
this
to
is
let
a
them-
courtesy,
Especially
if
not
nothing
during budget
else.
season.
Yeah,
Especially not during budget season.
I think it could be that we, if the Board of Selectmen is amenable to it, at least the way I'm thinking of it is that take the total, divide it by the number of acres,
Mhm.
and that as you open pit A, here's
Yeah.
proportional amount due when pit A is, when you want to move in pit B, another proportion is due pit C.
Yeah. I was even thinking about doing it all in pit A, because,
Okay,
because then
yeah,
it's done.
but why don't we,
Well, I certainly think it's something that could be, that's a very reasonable approach, and I don't see any issues with it, but I would certainly
Yeah.
think it's a courtesy that, and certainly the planning board and the Board of Selectmen want to be able to work with any business owner in town to keep them from facing undue hardship with a fee.
and I think with the number of cubic yards you get out, like you say, you should be able to earn the money back
Oh,
to
yeah,
do
yeah,
that, so.
yeah. The hard part is the initial, because
Getting started, yeah.
the AOT application is
Yeah.
incredible. So it's like,
Well, we'll try to
oh
help.
yeah, dealing
So,
with that at work, so.
so is it, would you have to approach the selectmen, or can Linda approach them, or how does that work?
I can approach them.
Personable? She's trying to
I can approach
She's
him.
only more so than me.
Well, I wasn't saying you weren't, I'm just
I
saying
know.
she's,
I know
don't
that.
be so sensitive.
I
You're
wasn't
digging
being, I
yourself
wasn't
deeper
being.
out.
Yeah, okay.
I'll
So,
approach it as simply a phased fee over time, is that
Even
what
if we
you're
did it
looking
over
for?
time, you
And
know,
I think
because
the board could work that out, as long as they understood
Yeah.
that.
it might actually be easier that way, because then we don't have to go out and calculate
right.
acres and stuff.
wow.
If we just said, you know, every 2 years, he's gotta write a check or something, you know, so. You notice Dave's not saying anything, but
He's worn down.
You're right.
Let's leave it at this, that I think the planning board is amenable to
Yeah.
a phased fee payment schedule.
and you could
as long
talk
as
to him,
it's
would you like us to go
documented.
with you? You know?
If you'd like,
I mean,
we
I'm
could
fine
set
doing
it up if you want to come in for a meeting.
Yeah. That we can't blame you if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
In fact, the more I think
It's a
about
good
it,
time of the year, even though it's budget season, it's also the holiday season.
That's right, I'll bring food or something, so,
There you go.
Yeah.
For those guys, that's a real good idea.
yeah.
And ladies, don't forget. Yes.
Okay, those are the things I had on the waiver.
Yep.
I did want to, like I said, on the review sheet.
Well, I guess before we move on, can I just recap where we are on each of these then, to make sure we're all on the same page? So waiver 1 for the filing fee, we're going to talk to the Board of Selectmen about paying the fee over time as the excavation occurs. Number 2, the auto and pedestrian circulation plan, we're talking about a partial waiver showing a conceptual layout of the field office, and then I guess a note explaining the condition of the proposed condition of the road throughout the site. Number 3, the lighting plan, we're still requesting a waiver for that plan. Number 4, the landscape plan, we're requesting a waiver for that, on the grounds that there will be a site reclamation plan that's filed as part of the excavation permit. Number 5, the erosion control plan is withdrawn. Number 6, we are still talking about having some sort of 1 inch equals 50 feet plan in the set, but we're leaving the waiver in there for now so we can keep talking about what exactly that's going to look like and whether or not we need this. And number 7 is withdrawn.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
So number 6, we agree on the approach, it's just whether we need to word
Yeah,
it.
we're going to leave the waiver request in for now, and we'll decide whether we actually need it or not.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead.
So just going to this, review sheet, you know, number 1, it's the sheet numbering, and number 2, the excavation permit. So there is an application that we will fill out.
Found it.
We don't get a request for a lot of those.
You
No.
have been? Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, you haven't, right.
We've probably gotten one.
So we'll
I think
fill that
I
out.
signed it.
We'll fill that out and get that back, and if there's something in there that we need in addition that's not in the set of plans, we'll just add it, so. And just generally, we'll make sure that, you know, the 155, calls for a restoration plan. You can't be within a certain distance of people's property. There aren't lots of things in there, but, you know, we'll just make sure that all those, state regulations are on the plan, so. The number 3, it says excavations are use is permitted on specific performance criteria contained in section. The board should review this criteria to ensure we have all set. Is that different than just like site plan?
So that's in the zoning code.
Yeah.
What section did I say that was? 5B.
5D1.
29.
You've already got page 29. So all permitted uses in the what's there again? zoning code fall into one of three categories for performance criteria. And excavations fall under the second category, so you would need to meet choose the phone. So if you want, I can run through them. There are 1, 2,
If you just tell me where they are.
4. So we can probably just make you a photocopy of this before you go.
Is it section?
Communication notes.
Five.
Section 5B1 of the zoning code has.
Okay.
the
So-
performance criteria.
so if I just
you can take
look
a
there-
through. And I don't have any specific concerns, it's just that this is
Okay.
higher than most uses in terms of the performance criteria.
Okay.
So I was just making the board aware of that.
On number 4, the access drive, I think we've talked about that. We're going to make sure we have site distance
Yeah,
for
and
all.
while we're
Some
on
distance
that
on
one,
that.
did Linda hand you a copy of this one? So these are
Those are
the
going around. I think those,
Board of Selectmen's guidelines for RSA 67441.
Is there an
The
extra
minimum
one?
standards for an emergency lane.
for them.
Oh,
Dave, you're in trouble here.
What's the matter?
did you get a copy?
4 inches of crushed gravel. I can't get crushed gravel on my property. How are you gonna get some on yours?
I know people.
So
He's got friends in high places.
Yeah.
So these are the 6 criteria that the Board of Selectmen would typically require for emergency lane standards on a private road. You already said you were planning 6-foot travel surface with 2-foot shoulders.
You mean 16?
Yeah, 16, sorry.
See, we're listening.
So you've got those 2, so if you hit the other 4 of those, then you're meeting the emergency lane standards that the Board of Selectmen would typically require. And how to get back to your point, this is one standard that we can apply to and say, as long as you're meeting this, we would consider that to be safe access.
Got it, okay. And does this look different from what you were thinking about?
No. In fact, I had a copy of this. I didn't.
Oh,
You cheated.
No, don't blame that.
okay, good.
Okay.
So again, I think for that, as long as there was a note or a label somewhere saying this access road is meeting those standards, I would say that's
Then
good.
we're covered, okay.
Well, and
Yep,
yes, but also, yeah,
The plans
For
will
the stand-
reflect that.
the plans would reflect that, but we're also looking at the, like I said, the choke points for either a bypass or something else. I don't think that these cover the entire length of it. It doesn't cover the safety issues.
Yeah. I
But
think
Or pull off, or whatever you want to call it.
but
And
wouldn't those be covered by the mining?
probably, I don't
standards?
know.
probably not.
Oh, no. Oh.
Yeah. But we're going to put them in there because we think we need
Need
them.
them in there, yeah, okay.
We've talked about it. I think we can take a look for, trust your engineering guidance. I can take a look at it.
Yeah.
Not that I'm an engineer, but if we have any questions, we can always, we know people that we can call if we have to.
Okay.
We have a little bit of experience with this stuff.
Yeah. Number 5 is wetlands. We have gone to the zoning board of adjustment and the conservation commission and actually got a nice letter from the conservation commission commending us on doing a great job. So we do have impacts on the wetland buffer, but we have no impacts on the wetlands. And
It's in the back corner there, the upper back
Wait
corner.
a second.
Where the two,
Here,
Yes.
yes, that's straight wetland buffer. And actually, all these are just wetland buffer, because when we build the structure, it's gonna go from the top of the bank to the top of the bank, and I should have brought a copy of it, but in the DES regulations for a wetland permit, it says, here's all the things you don't need a permit for, and that's one of the things it describes. If you aren't going over the top of the bank down into the brook, but go from here to here, you don't need a permit, so. So we're just making it long enough so that it's out there, and, yeah.
that wouldn't cover piers.
Say again?
That wouldn't cover like a support or something.
No, but these are so short that,
Yeah.
you know, they're only 30, 40 feet long, you
Right.
know, so we'll just span it from one end to the other.
With a full truck?
Oh, yeah,
Some pretty big beams.
It's
yeah.
always
Yeah. Actually, they're
Mr.
Actually,
Chairman,
they're not
I
that
do have a
big,
copy of the
it's
notice of
surprising.
decision I will give to Susan for the file, and that will be recorded at the registry.
Sure. Thank you.
And they will receive a copy in the mail.
Okay.
um,
Okay. Snow was
Steep-
wetlands.
steep slopes. Um, we didn't put any steep slope analysis on it, because it's, in the area where we're excavating, it's gonna end up being flat, whatever it is, whether it's 2% or 25%. And I guess I didn't see a value in, you know, taking the time to highlight where it is, and then it's gonna be gone anyways.
Do we, I mean, we typically worry about that for access and stuff, right? You know, like I was thinking about the driveway and stuff, where we asked them to move the line over so they could get by without going into that.
Well, it's
but-
because, for the driveway, it's because they didn't, we have no allowed impacts for 25% or greater,
Yeah,
or 25, yeah, slope of 25% greater.
but in, well, at least in
In
our
a case
site
like
law.
this, the other reason I like to see it is for, essentially that we have a record that it was there.
I mean, I can put it on, it doesn't matter, just,
Is that something your computer can calculate, or is that, you have to do a hand analysis to do that?
no, we can do it. The computer does it, sort of, and it's close enough, so.
Yeah, I mean, we did some of this before where they used just the existing data they had and just had the computer sort of figure it out.
The existing GIS data.
So for me, this is more a code concern, a zoning code concern than a practical concern. And it gets back to the overlay that we are hoping to make some zoning amendments to clear it up and make it more user-friendly. But right now, we've got extreme limitations on touching 25% slopes, and touching 20% slopes requires a special exception.
Okay, but, well, I'm going just on what we walked. Did you remember seeing anything, Bob, for the road where we're more than 20%?
I mean, I wasn't measuring it. I don't think so.
20% is pretty steep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's why I was
20% is
sort
pretty
of saying. I mean, I
But
think
it's-
James is right. We'd be worried if you're disturbing something that you're not excavating, you know, like maybe a wetland area or something with a steep slope, but I don't remember seeing any that this would
Why don't we figure out where they are, because I don't think there's gonna be much of it.
have.
And then if we have to do something, we have to do something, because what we don't want to do is have this 20% slope in the middle and we excavate all around just to keep up,
Yeah, exactly.
you know.
Yeah, well, we can do,
Okay,
You can have that for next time.
yeah. Yeah, most of these things we've already addressed, but I just wanted to talk about things like that so that we can have it completed.
yeah.
And I guess what I was thinking was if we get it completed and we send it in, then planner can review it, and then we can maybe go back and forth a little bit so that
Sure.
we don't have to talk about some of these things, so those are really the things that I think I had.
Okay.
One last thing. The bond, we were gonna calculate, moving material around and doing reclaiming, but we were looking to use the material that's there and not be, bringing in other material. And where it's what makes up the woods today, it will be what makes up the woods tomorrow, so.
I think the issue is, on the bond though, is more the idea that if for some reason you walk away after you've taken everything out, someone would not be it would be
Assurance.
the town assurance that
Yeah.
the town has the ability to restore it.
Yeah, but I was thinking that whoever did that would use the material just like we would,
Site. He's
on the
just saying-
onset material.
He's saying they would be willing to bond the work to put the stuff back like they're
Right.
planning on doing it.
Yeah.
They just don't want to have to bond
The material.
20 acres of 6 inches of topsoil because they're proposing not to put 20 inches or 6 inches of topsoil because there's not 6 inches of topsoil there now.
Yeah. We had the same situation previously.
Yes.
And I don't think the engineer agreed to that. Our engineer.
It was a lot smaller area though. And the interior was being left as a sales area, all gravel. And the only restoration was sort of around the edges, so it wasn't a lot. This is gonna be the whole thing. It's gonna be, it's gonna be 23, 33, 35 acres
Right.
which is, and to sit on a bond for 40 years, it's like,
One approach might be for the board, if they're in agreement with that approach and don't have a concern about that, would be to relay that and then, as we would typically do, have them provide a figure and then the engineer would review their proposal.
Say that again?
Typically with a bond, the applicant would provide an initial amount
Yep.
and an analysis of what that would include.
Right.
And it would include what,
Reclaim
and I think with
10
a,
acres at, 6 inches of topsoil at a cost of, per ton
With
or
a-
whatever.
right, with a recommendation from the board that they, under these conditions, would be amiable to the idea of using on-site materials, then I think that would mean a lot going into that process.
that would work. I think that would work fine for us, because, we gotta pay for the labor and the guy to do all this
Sure,
stuff,
sure.
but.
I guess the other question I have is, can some of those bonds, similar to the fee that we talked about, do you need to take out the bond on the reclamation of Area C before they actually start to do Area C?
Well, that's what needs to be determined, I think,
I
in the
think we would be
phasing
relying on
aspect.
the engineers to come up with that phasing structure of
But there
the
wouldn't-
escrow
yeah.
payments and the bonds and all of that.
But that's something we could maybe consider, but we'd have to see what they say.
We did
And
that.
I think if there's going to be a little bit more analysis and discretion required as part of that, it might behoove us to start that conversation with the town engineer sooner rather than later, so that we don't get to a point that
Right.
we've given this conditional approval and we're waiting several months for negotiations over the bond amount.
That's why we did the restoration phasing, thinking that we would have a bond on what's open,
Open.
and then once we
Close it.
restore it, we reduce the bond by that amount.
Well, I guess I was thinking maybe similar to that, but before you open Part B, you'd have to
Yeah.
bond Part B,
Right.
and then, like you say, when
So
you,
if the bond amount is going to be, if restoration of Part A is approximately the same as restoration of B is approximately the same as restoration of C, maybe you're bonding for a third of the total reclamation and it just applies to the next area.
Exactly.
right, as you move on, because it does, I mean, we wouldn't need to be able to reclaim Part C if you never touched it.
Right.
Correct. Correct. And that would be part of the phasing aspect of it.
But, yeah, I think you're right. Let's see what our engineer would say. But is that something you can do the initial calculations
Oh, yeah,
on?
we'll do that now. And, because I'd like to get that resolved so we know what we're doing.
And, yeah,
And I think the way you just described it is the reasonable way of doing it. That, you know, the disturbed areas which you bond, and if you're getting bigger, maybe that number gets bigger, or we just pick out an amount and say, you know, we have 35 acres, so what would it take to do 10 acres or something?
oh, just sort of prorate it.
And then just say that that's the amount, and sometimes it's going to be more, sometimes it's going to be less. So we're not coming back every year and calculating how many acres. Or do it by,
I would
we can do it by the
Let the
phase.
engineers and
Yeah.
you make,
We'll think about it some
do
more.
the calculations
Think about
and
it
see
some
what, yeah.
that. I would like to, I can see a clear delineation between or for pit C,
Mhm.
in terms of, you know,
Once you start.
timeframe, one, yeah,
Yeah.
that's easy to clarify. The reclamation for Part A, or for Pit A and Pit B is less distinct
Yeah.
because you have your processing area in Pit A, which will cover Pit B, and Pit A can't be closed until, you know, Pit A and C, or A, B and C are done, and then you're going back to the, so, but that's in the reclamation zone, I'll let you
Yeah, let
figure
them
that
figure it
out.
out and
I think we can come up with something.
make a suggestion.
So those are really the things that I wanted to talk about, because what we would like to do is go away, finalize the plans, do those calculations for restoration, and get it to, so that it gets done, and then
5A.
we'll come back.
Okay.
I have a question related to the drawings, especially like the one you have there. Are you willing to share those electronically or only in paper form?
Oh, sure. Make PDFs out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of sheets, the file gets pretty big.
No, I'm just talking about the one, the overview one.
Oh, down there, sure.
And you talked about like having it one where you sort of outline, okay, these are the 3 maps that you might have to look at.
Yeah.
Just a couple of the key ones so that we could have our computer open and look at those, or maybe even just use it for reference
Yeah.
when we're looking at the other ones.
Sure.
Because that would
Yeah.
really help.
Sure.
But
That'd be-
all the other ones, you know, I
Yeah.
don't think it's
Right.
worth that, but like that one and a couple of the other ones like that, I appreciate.
Yeah.
One thing that Linda pointed out to me this evening, included in those performance criteria and zoning, and the criteria that apply to all uses, there is a noise limitation, that noise that's not due to normal human activity shall not exceed 65 decibels measured at the property line. I am not great with decibels, and that might be a question for the blasting folks, but whether you would meet that or whether you would need some sort of a waiver to cover that noise level.
That's a zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously, we must address that out front somehow.
You did. You
I
have
think you have it on the out front parcels, but not for the back parcels.
And you
I think if
should
we can make it
probably
work
be
out.
aware that that variance was extended and it ends in December 31, 2018,
The variance
for the front lot,
For the noise?
for the noise, for drilling and blasting.
For drilling them.
I know you had
What-
the
what-
different,
What was the date?
December.
December 31st of 2018?
Correct.
That's like next
A month
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
But I thought you had all those special exceptions and variances, so I didn't, because we talked about some of them.
For
So
the-
that's something that you,
For the
If
back or
you're-
for the front?
for the front.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something you typically do in the winter months, but
blasting.
it's certainly something that will need to be addressed.
Yeah.
No, done for the winter, but I don't know why that wasn't extended with how we extended the project, but I'm not sure.
Because it's a conditional variance. There was one that, I think it was for either 2 or 3 years, and then you came back, and I think it was extended for another 5 years.
Something, yeah.
Whatever it's been.
We should just talk about that, so, because if we need to go do something, we need to go do it
Yeah,
pretty soon.
yeah.
Is that
Back
only if
tomorrow.
we exceed the decibel sound?
Correct, you can't exceed the decibel sound on the front lot.
Are you gonna be doing more blasting there, Dave, in the front?
Yeah, but not this winter, but still, needs to be taken care of.
Before you get to that in the spring?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, so it's not like this month critical.
But it would literally
soon.
expire,
Like
It does
condo.
expire.
so,
I'll send you a copy of it.
Yeah.
Is it
of
easier
the-
to extend than reapply?
Oh, it has to be reapplied for.
Yeah.
And it's a
See,
different
right.
zoning board. They have to, you have to go through the same process again. Because it's done as of that date.
We got that because we were blasting right up against the property line, and we couldn't.
Right, I
add
don't
that.
know. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll have to figure out whether it's
Right.
necessary or
So I'm
not.
thinking in the back, where we're quite a ways from the property line even, we probably don't need that, so we'll
If
have to
there
find
was
out.
some way to get like a letter from Maine Blasting
Yeah.
saying sound's gonna decay by this point and
I'm sure they have that, they say,
Oh, they must have to deal with that all the time.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, we should talk about that tomorrow.
You wanna take we'll continue this for date certain, but do you want to take a recess to talk with the applicant while you're here? Afterward for some of the detail?
Oh, so I have to, well, I just have to print out their notice of decision. I
Yeah,
don't,
That's all, yeah.
Okay, just thought I'd ask while.
Are you around here?
I mean, if
You're
it's
here?
something that you want to apply for,
When's the deadline for applying?
Monday for December.
Oh, yeah, so I can stick it to it tomorrow.
You have all day tomorrow to work on that.
It's no problem, I can fill out the form tonight. I don't sleep.
Let's take a break and at least get what you need.
Oh, we can do it tomorrow, it's all right, yeah.
are you in tomorrow?
I will be in tomorrow.
Linda is here every day.
Yep.
Well, no, I'm not,
Not quite sure.
actually.
In spirit, she's here every day.
That's what
Okay,
I meant.
so
Okay,
it sounds like you're good
yep,
for Leo, or at least we're at a point where we're had a good discussion about it. A couple things up in the air. Next,
12th,
pardon?
December 27th.
Like 7?
27.
Yes, that's right.
I thought we moved that meeting.
Also, too.
Yes, we did.
We did, to the 27th.
We moved it to the 27th?
Well, because-
Yeah.
There's not
It would have been the 27th. I thought we moved it to the 20th.
I thought so too. Yeah.
We thought it was
Well,
the
let's say the minutes.
27th.
the board meets twice a month.
Twice a month, yes. We
Yeah.
moved it to the 20th, December 20th.
I'm
I've
just,
got it on the
I'm just
20th.
concerned that by December 20th, they're not gonna,
Don't,
You're not going to have enough
I don't
ready?
think so. We gotta have some back and forth, and I don't think that's all gonna happen.
Well, I mean,
But
we're on
we'll
the
be
clock.
ready.
There's no harm in requesting
I
a
thought it was the
continuance.
20th.
Yeah.
So
If
we had
need be,
plenty of
or,
yeah, I thought we did.
Do we just wanna be on the agenda and we'll come and talk about where we are?
That's why we did
I mean, we might have another question.
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we just do that, so that if we don't have any questions, we'll just come and say hello.
Well,
We'll
you can just say, request a
Nothing to
continuance by
discuss.
email was fine.
Okay.
By doing so, that saves you a trip out here.
We don't have enough time to notice, that's
Yeah,
why we're
that's why we
doing the
didn't- we didn't do
27th.
the 20th because of the time.
We
that
talked about the 20th, but we didn't have
Well-
enough time to do the notice.
I thought we were both going to move to the 20th and with the application deadline to
Yeah, but we
tomorrow.
can't, we
do
can't
that,
do that,
yeah.
because people come in on the day that they know the
I thought that's
application
what
deadline
we
is.
had decided,
I
that
thought
it
that's
was,
what we decided then.
that it was too hard
Yeah.
to let people know that.
How could we possibly let everybody know?
That's
That's out there, you know,
thinking about.
the big world out
I
there.
remember we had the discussion,
We don't know who's coming in. I mean, we have one that's said they're coming in that could have come in any month for the last 6 months, but they're coming in next month.
And I told him,
well, let's just set the date. and
Is that a
see what it
problem?
Yep, I have it, I put it in my
You're
gonna
calendar,
be
both the 20th
chilling.
and the
yeah,
27th.
you're not even
Yeah.
part of this.
27th.
So stop complaining.
Except that's what we're saying, wasn't it?
He's gonna have his feet up on the couch,
He's wrapping his baby in bubble wrap. That's what
Yeah.
he
Are we-
did.
swaddling
carved
him
in
over.
stone?
December 27th. He's
Never-
not.
He's gonna be
I mean,
off on
I know,
the,
I know, we
He's
know
gonna
you're-
be in
you have other
Babyland.
questions. You have other commitments.
Yeah,
Put it that way, not questions.
but I
That's the word I was looking
I
for.
think I told Jen to flag the 20th
She'll have to flag
because
the
I thought we agreed to move it. I'll let her know tomorrow and she can figure out staffing for the 27th if I'm not available.
Okay. I was gonna say,
If I could get a way of getting hold of you directly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is my SRPC contact, but my wife's due date for our first child is on Monday.
Do you want me to do something?
So
if you can't get hold of them or you don't get an answer,
I see.
keep that in
that
mind.
phone number is the general office number.
Yeah.
And our executive director, Jen Sizz, is probably going to be the person filling in for me.
What's her name?
Jen Sizz, C-Z-Y-S-Z.
C-Z-Y-S-Z.
Yep. So if you call that number and ask for Jen, if I'm not around, she'll be able to talk to you.
Yep. Right.
If you send an email to that, well, to either of my email addresses, either my SRPC one or the town one, I'll have an out of office.
Yeah. Okay.
Message up with her email
All right.
too.
I won't call you Monday. Tuesday. Okay.
So the meeting is now on the 27th.
27th?
I think it always was, but we thought that. I thought that was the final decision because
20th and the
we
27th.
we couldn't notice it any sooner.
Okay, so I guess we'll make it officially the 27th.
Okay, great. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, could I ask one other question?
Sure.
Is there any interest in a site walk? I know a couple of you have. Well, there's a potential for that, for the whole board. Because we're not getting any more snow for at least 3 or 4 weeks. I'm just
Oh, yeah,
sure of it.
uh-huh.
Knock on
I
all
was gonna
time.
say, that's why I was like, boy,
We weren't the last trip.
of all the people who were requesting.
Monday, I thought it wasn't going to snow.
I'm okay with
that.
Oh, that was all
If
rain.
you're willing to let people
Yeah,
walk
once
on
I
the property,
got to Rochester,
Absolutely.
it was raining, but then
I'd be willing to walk other folks out and at least walk through where we went. I mean, we're not gonna see anything, we wouldn't be able to answer any more detailed questions, but we'd at least be able to show folks what we saw.
Keeping in mind that if 3 of us to get together on a planning board capacity, it is a meeting.
I would lead the first group of 2.
Of two. Of two.
It's a meeting if it's 3.
Just wanted to clarify that, so.
Right, can't be a quorum.
It can't be for them. Anyway,
Well, it can be if you want it to
I
be
don't know,
that.
we need to exercise the engineers.
yeah,
I
no,
mean, just, I mean, it's,
for,
well,
we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.
Should we take a 5-minute?
Yes, we'll take a 5-minute recess. So we're back from recess at 8:30. Zoning amendments.
So you should all have 2 sets
Copy?
in front of you.
No, I didn't get any of those.
I think there are extras over here. One is all of the changes that I have been working on compiled into a single document with ballot language. So I want to run through the ballot language really quickly for the ones we've already said look good, and then we've got the steep slopes in this one to talk about. The other one that you should have says number 7, pre-existing non-conforming seasonal dwellings at the top.
Yeah.
I think these are materials from Laura related to the regulation issue that we talked about. And I'm hoping that Linda will come back in by the time it's time to talk about those, because I'm seeing these for the first time tonight.
Okay.
I think Linda also should have a memo from the ZBA about the steep slope ordinance. They had a chance to look at that Monday night.
The proposed or the existing?
The proposed. So again, I'm hoping she's back in here by the time we get to that. So I guess we can start with some of the ballot language.
Yep.
Amendment 1, that was trying to deal with the structure and driveway issue. So usual format, are you in favor of adoption, etc. As follows: amend the definitions of a structure and a driveway to clarify that unpaved driveways are not considered structures.
So what would actually appear on the ballot?
Everything from ballot language and the line below it. So it would appear exactly like that.
Okay.
The underlined bit, are you in favor of adoption of Amendment 1 as proposed by the planning board as follows, colon, amend the definitions of a structure and a driveway to clarify that unpaved driveways are not considered structures.
So the language stuff in the strike through and the underlined in red.
The full amendment would not appear. This would be what would be on file at the town office.
Yep, just double check it. And the strike through is this language being removed, and the underscore underlined is language
Yes.
being added.
Correct.
So double check we're all talking the same.
Yep, and there haven't been any changes to the actual language since the last time you saw it.
Okay.
Okay. Number 2.
Just one question on the amendment 1, because I noticed it. We have pavers, both pervious and impervious, as structures, but we have unpaved driveways as not structures. Is there a significant difference in the permeability of pavers versus gravel?
So I didn't want, and I think we've talked about this previously, I wanted to move to paved versus unpaved as opposed to pervious versus impervious, just because factors can change.
Yes. I
And,
completely agree.
and
I
it's a
understand.
lot easier to make a distinction between paved and unpaved than it is to make a distinction between pervious and impervious.
Yes.
I think for the exact reason that you're bringing up, that if you had pervious pavers, those are actually probably more porous than like stone dust.
I agree. The reason I bring it up is that do we need any additional clarification, not on the ballot, not necessarily in the amendment, but on understanding of that? Is that a way to poke a hole in the definition of an unpaved driveway as a non-structure? But a because pervious pavers are more pervious than non-structures. Does that make sense? Did I state it?
I think if you were doing pervious pavers, you would still have some concerns about the stability that might be impacted by sides of property, wetlands, all of those things that you would still want that certain amount of scrutiny to it.
Sure.
So I don't think anybody is going to be able to skirt the proposed zoning distinction. I think this is the clearest zoning distinction that I could make in my head between the two.
I completely agree.
So I think-
because it's a surface.
Right.
A paver, whether it's pervious or not, is a surface.
So I don't think
That makes it
I don't
sense,
think
but-
somebody would be able to challenge this
Okay.
on grounds of permeability or anything like that. I think we've set as clear a definition, difference, and distinction as we can.
Okay. Just
And I think this is more defensible than some of the alternatives.
good. Thank you. Number two.
Number two, so this change is referencing the expiration dates of special exceptions and variances approved by the ZBA. The 2-year expiration date is an item of state law, so this isn't really having a regulatory change impact. But by adding this to the zoning code, we're making sure that anybody that's looking at that section is going to see this. Taking away some unpleasant surprises that nobody told me this was in state law and in the RSAs and not in your zoning code. So this one, again, are you in favor of the change as follows? Add a new section to Roman 2F regarding the Zoning Board of Adjustment, referencing the expiration of variances and special exceptions approved after August 19th of 2013, consistent with state law described in RSA 674-33.
Okay.
We good with that one?
I think
All right.
so. Here's much from anybody else complaining.
No,
so.
it's good. Just keep
I
going.
think we've already gone over all these one by one.
We
we?
haven't talked about the ballot language. So I was running through the ballot language really quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Number 3, this was the scheduled termination that we are allowed to do as of this year because of a new piece of legislation that deals with all of those things approved before that date that sort of exist in perpetuity right now, to borrow a word from Hal. So setting an end date on those. So again, are you in favor of a change as follows? Add a new section to Roman 2F regarding the Zoning Board of Adjustment, scheduling the termination of variances and special exceptions that were approved before that date and have not been exercised. If approved, this amendment would require notice to be posted for 1 year, and unused variances and special exceptions would terminate 2 years after the expiration of public notice.
So the only question I have about that is that we have used the term notice and public notice separately. First, in that last sentence. And my only thought would be to add, to require public notice to be posted, which is sort of
I
redundant.
think referring to both as public notice makes sense.
Okay. Just for clarification
Yep.
on that. It is very redundant language, but
Yeah, better to say.
public notice being posted, like, yeah, okay, but that way it's in there, nobody can contest it.
Otherwise, we're good.
I think so.
Amendment 4. This was, we caught a couple stray things that referred to new building or newly created lots, and we wanted to pull out new because the zoning applies to all building and all created lots. So are you in favor of the change as follows? Amend multiple sections of section Roman 4 General District to clarify that zoning provisions apply to all lots of record, not only new lots. This amendment would not impact uses, structures, or lots that have non-conforming rights.
Thank you for clarifying that. That will solve, I think, a lot of people, residents' minds.
So in effect, this isn't changing how we're interpreting the zoning code at all, but we wouldn't want to see a challenge based on some questionable language like that. I think this is one that it might be worth discussing, particularly if people aren't going to be entirely clear on the day of the election of what that distinction is, for whether we need to do some outreach to explain this to people.
On this one, that's probably a good idea.
And I would say that might also apply to the previous two.
Yes.
For what exactly we're intending to do with these. One isn't a change at all, the other is just something that we're putting to the voters because it's new and we're allowed to do it.
When does the ballot notice?
Voters guide.
Voters guide, thank you, that's what I was looking for.
That typically goes out,
Early February,
early.
just double checking that.
Generally about 10 days to 2 weeks before the deliberative.
Okay.
So we'll still have
So
plenty
that
of
would,
time.
and that would have your comments in it as well.
Okay, so you would normally just put those right in the voter's guide?
Yes,
Or we
and that
want-
gets sent to every home in Northwood.
Okay.
Exactly. And these are not subject to deliberation anyway,
No, but
but that's a good
that
time
would be a
to
good
talk about them.
opportunity to reach people.
To me, which is fine. Okay. Number 4, okay?
So that brings us to number 5, which is the steep slope change. So let's talk about the ordinance itself first and walk through that, and then we can come back to the ballot language. So I laid this out essentially as a straight repeal and replace. I thought that was going to be a lot easier than trying to approximate track changes. And then I laid my comments out following the same structure so we can go section by section. The purpose statement is basically a combination of what you have now and stuff out of the model ordinance from the innovative land use controls. Since we were talking about this being a conditional use permit, I wanted to tie it to that innovative land use control for reasons that we can talk about more in a bit. So I don't think there's really much to be said about the purpose. Same with the authority. This isn't something that we have in a lot of sections of the zoning code right now, but again, because I was trying to make that connection to the innovative land use controls, I wanted to add this, and this is something that does appear in the model.
Okay.
Section 3, delineation. This is based on Dover's 2,000 square foot minimum that we talked about last time. And it's set up so that the 2,000 square foot minimum applies to getting you into the overlay, and then areas that are already within the overlay and are 25% or greater are what gets kicked up to the greater level of restrictions. So if there was a 1,000 square foot area of 25% slopes that doesn't have any 20% slopes around it, that's below the 2,000 square feet. That's not in the overlay. That's not regulated. If there was something that was 1,500 square feet of 20% and 500 square feet of 25%, that hits your 2,000, so it's in the overlay, and the additional requirements of the 25% slopes would apply to that 500 square feet.
Okay, just for clarification, we use the language slopes in excess of 20%. So 20% plus 20.1% is in there, 20% is not.
I can change it to slopes of 20% or greater,
Okay, I would,
if you think that's
I think
clear.
that 20% cutoff is nice, I would, and that's easy to calculate.
I was reading in excess of 20% being 20% and greater,
Yes,
but
oh yeah, I
if
understand.
you
Yeah.
think just saying 20% or greater is
Yeah.
clearer,
Right.
clarity is always
Yeah.
great.
Figure that earlier today I was doing grade scale percentages where you argue about, you know, is 95.1% an
Is
A
it
plus?
an A or an A plus? Yeah.
Exactly.
We
So
don't want,
decimals, and how many decibels do you go out to? 90.01? So,
I've left my teaching days behind me and I don't want to have those conversations anymore.
sorry. But you can see why
Yeah.
I got on the language. And I'm assuming that silence is assent generally, that you'll speak up if you have problems.
Silence is golden.
All right, section 4 is where we introduce the conditional use permit. If we decided to go with a special exception instead, I would just be making the tweaks in this section to go from conditional use and planning board to special exception and zoning board. So anything that is permitted in the underlying district is allowed in this but requires a conditional use. Or CUP, so that would cover structures, uses, what have you, and we're not setting ourselves a separate list. The list is just look at the general district and see what you're allowed to do.
Right. I had a question on item C. The proposed impact will not destabilize land in the steep slope protection overlay district. How is that determined for destabilization?
The discretion of the board that is reviewing this.
Okay.
Well, actually, we had,
I mean,
Well-
Peter talked about some of that, where if it's certain types of soils, you might have to
Yep.
worry about that.
Exactly.
So,
You have what's called natural slope of repose
yeah,
for soil, which is,
depends on the type. But
Depends on the
yeah,
type,
You
right.
could get some ideas on that.
and I think in general, in these sections, particularly in the conditional use required as opposed to the application requirements section, I want it to be a little bit more general and rely on the board's discretion rather than painting ourselves into a corner, especially if this is going to live in the zoning code.
sure,
Because if it's in the zoning code, you can't waive sections.
right. I agree. It was more a question than
Yeah.
anything about seeing how that works. I also would then, well,
So I guess let's stick on
Yeah.
section 4 for now.
Yep.
Linda, would this be a good time to talk about your memo?
Sure.
If this is one of the points that the ZBA wanted to talk about?
Well, you had asked that I go back and talk to the ZBA about it. We brought it up Monday night. I'll read you the memo. The zoning board discussed the potential elimination of the steep slopes overlay district special exception at their Monday, November 26, 2018 meeting. The zoning board agrees that the status quo is working as far as the special exception process for steep slopes. The zoning board understands your interest in amending the criteria within the section, and we would appreciate being apprised of any new amendments being recommended. The zoning board would like to keep the special exception process in place for steep slopes. Feel free to contact the ZBA if you would like to discuss further or to hold a joint meeting. Thank you in advance for your work to revise and update the zoning ordinance.
So they're saying they want to keep it within their jurisdiction.
That's what they said. It obviously is up to the planning board to make the decision to, because you're the legislative body that could amend that, but you asked for their opinion.
We did.
And they're satisfied with the way it is, they don't have any concerns, and they would prefer it stay the way it is.
And the idea of moving from a CUP, or from a special exception to a CUP is that it stays within the planning board, so that an applicant would not have to go to an additional meeting.
That's true.
There's sort of, on the one hand, you can streamline the process so that you just need a conditional use permit and it's just vote after vote on one night and you're done. Versus on the other hand, a sort of ideological consistency that any exception to the zoning ordinance would be done by the ZBA.
And you would be taking on the residential aspect of it. It may be very limited, we don't, that.
Well,
So if we, in terms of the work we've already done on this though, as far as language goes, if we decided to keep the special exception aspect of it, it would essentially just go through and say, where you see CUP, you're going
Yep.
back to special exception.
It would just be a find and replace for me. I would probably change conditional use required to special exception required. Any reference to a conditional use permit would be a special exception. Any reference to the planning board would be the ZBA. And then
So we get what we want as far as definitions go.
yeah,
We just don't.
we don't
get to process them.
yeah, there is no functional difference from a legal perspective between a CUP and a special exception. We wouldn't be losing anything process-wise.
Well, I'd like to sort of see us keep it simple for the applicant, but I think the zoning board, probably realizes that, but has reasons for saying, no, it's better to keep it all consistent.
And the other thing to keep in mind is that we are not proposing the same change for the wetland conservation overlay right now.
Because we had Greenwood Street, they had to come to the zoning board for those two special exceptions. If it was the case that you guys changed it, they'd be getting a special exception from the ZBA and then coming to you for a conditional use permit. Like it would have not streamlined it.
Yeah, so.
True,
So
yeah, that's
I-
a good point.
I do think it would be better to be consistent
I agree.
on all of those.
Yeah, so
And if we're not ready to do that with wetlands, it might be better
Yeah.
to leave it as a special exception for now, and if we think that there really does need to be some sort of a customer service streamlining thing, that we can have that conversation over a longer period of time with
yeah,
the
work on that
ZBA.
separately, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's not
something-
hard to modify then?
No, it's not hard to modify. We just need motion and vote to do so.
So I'll make a motion to.
Well, I can keep track of the changes and we can vote to do them all at
All
once.
of this, okay,
Okay,
good.
that's fine. There was more being something of that magnitude that was more substantive than language changes,
I'm glad we talked,
but yeah.
I'm glad we asked.
Well, because of that change, I think I would recommend at least one more as we get further in.
Okay.
Apart from going back to the ZBA, is everybody okay with the criteria under special exception required?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question on section, we're still on section 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Section 5, application requirements. I wanted to try to separate what they have to give us and what they have to convince us will happen as two separate items. So whereas the conditional use required is saying this is what you need to convince the board to that will be the case. It's not going to cause this problem. It's not going to cause that problem. This one is the materials you have to give us to show that at minimum.
So, James, just to take that thought further, is this what they're showing us or the zoning board?
Because of what we just talked about, it would be showing the zoning board.
Okay.
So that change from conditional use to special exception and planning board to ZBA is going to be all throughout,
Got it.
wherever it appears.
Is there any, one of the questions I had on this was, we have 4C, talking about destabilizing land, but we don't have any showing of that. Is that something we can add on under 5? I was thinking under 5B in specific, but I just haven't gotten the language in it. A plan prepared by an
I'm
engineer.
trying to remember, I think I took this language from Concord's bluff ordinance.
That's what how I saw it, that you did.
And I think we could beef it up. But I think essentially what they need to give you is whatever materials you or now the ZBA needs to see to be convinced that the stuff is going to be stable. So in certain cases, I would think that could be extra engineering. In certain cases, you may not need it much of anything in particular.
I was just looking at, we mentioned stabilization in 4C, erosion and runoff on 4D.
I was not thinking of. Oop. We've got A, B, C, B, C.
We do.
I was not thinking of these as being parallel. A goes to A, B goes
Sure.
to B.
No, I understand that. It was more the idea of, I'm seeing it as, we mentioned a list of specific items that, these are what are required for your conditional use. No stabilization, no erosion, or control erosion,
So
no runoff. I'm just trying to
would
think
you, if somebody came in with something and said, here's our plan with 2-foot contours, and here is an engineered plan showing everything we're doing to control any loss of topsoil during construction and in the finished product. And here's something showing all of the hydrology and where things are going to drain and flood. What more would you want to see to convince you that it would be stable?
I don't know. That's why I'm bringing it up. If it's, it might be that we don't need it.
So
I don't know.
if there's not one thing that you would want to see consistently in all cases, I would point out in the intro paragraph it says shall include at minimum.
Okay. Okay.
shall be accompanied by adequate documentation to address the criteria above and shall include at minimum these things. So we're going to get these items on everything, but if there's something that you need to see to address the criteria above, you should ask for it.
Good point. That's what happens when I skip over a word.
Yeah, they just know they need to show up with this, and then they
Right.
can still ask questions.
Sure.
Anything else under 5?
Well, I'm only going to ask this question because it comes up sometimes. The 2-foot contours, I guess we just leave it in there at that, because if somebody wants to do 5, wants to do it based on LiDAR instead of survey and stuff, we can discuss it with them at that point.
So you wouldn't be able to waive this,
Yeah. This is-
but it also says the impact to the steep slope protection district is depicted in 2-foot contours, not the site.
Ah, okay, okay.
So
we're just talking about a very specific area.
right, so like
Which they
same with
should,
the wetland impacts that the applicant had tonight, they showed a zoomed in thing of
That.
here's this buffer impact on the bridge that we're building. If they were proposing to impact the slopes, we would just want to zoomed in, show us in 2-foot contours the detail of that area.
Okay, I understand now.
And that, I think, helps to distinguish between the ZBA's role in review, focused on the impact to the slope area itself, versus the planning board's role in big picture site plan subdivision.
Okay, good.
Do you think that there needs to be anything changed to A to make that clearer?
Well,
Or not,
that's
now that
part of the
we've
reason why I
talked
asked it.
about
It says the impact of the steep slope protection overlay district, which could imply,
So
You're
if
in the
instead of
flood.
the impact to the area of proposed impacts to,
yeah,
would that be better?
the area of the proposed impact depicted. I think, I don't think you need to say steep slope protection overlay district. The whole thing applies to that. I think you could just say, the impacted area depicted in 2-foot contours.
Anything else under 5?
Not for me anyway.
Number 6, costs. We have this elsewhere in
Standard.
the codes, but it was in the model ordinance, so I threw it in part because I was trying to keep this structure consistent with the model ordinance, but that's probably not quite as important now. And number 7 was the reason why I was trying to stay close, was that per the RSAs, if the planning board is reviewing a conditional use permit that is an innovative land use control, that doesn't get appealed to the ZBA. That goes straight to Superior Court. So I was trying to stay as close as possible to the innovative land use control template, so there was no question that that's what this was, so that there would be no question that all appeals would go to Superior Court instead of the ZBA. If this is staying a ZBA thing, I would suggest just striking section
Yeah.
7.
Yeah,
We don't need it.
just goes. And they have their own process for appeals. And,
I mean, the process for appealing their stuff would be the same. It would go straight to Superior Court. I'm not using to read here. And then number 8, I wanted to handle all of the conditional use permit stuff first and together. So now we're coming back to the additional restrictions on very steep slopes, which are 25% or greater. So that's construction of roads, structures, or driveways. I wanted to have all 3. Shall be prohibited slopes of 25% or more aren't used to fulfill any part of the minimum lot size.
So you need to have driveways in there because we haven't passed the first one.
I want to have driveways in there because if we do pass it, there will be types of driveways that aren't structures. And if we don't pass it, then I don't want there to be any question that all of those apply anyway.
Got it, yeah.
So my interpretation of this section as it's been written is that only construction of those things is forbidden. That does not mean that any impact to 25% or greater is forbidden. And that if somebody came in with an excavation permit request, a request to log their property,
Right.
if it was on a 25% or greater slope, they would be allowed to do it as part of a conditional use permit, just like anything else in the overlay.
And then just have your explanations.
Yep.
But number 7 would go out completely, right? Just to
Number 7 would go out completely, and I'd renumber number 8.
pretty good to me.
Yep.
So going back up to the ballot language
Or the steep slopes.
for the steep slopes. I would suggest changing that to changes as follows. Replace section 6E with a new section 6E steep slope protection overlay district that sets a minimum threshold of 2,000 square feet of sloped area for the overlay to apply, and revises the criteria for the granting of a special exception by the ZBA. So I'm not entirely sure that that covers everything because we do also have the costs thing that's in there and the authority stuff. So it might be worth adding a and other administrative provisions of the overlay as sort of a final.
Oh, for the ballot language?
Yeah. And then obviously this is going to be sent over to Laura so that you can take a look.
So you're going to read replace section 6E with the new section 6E steep slopes protection overlay district that sets a minimum threshold of 2,000 square feet of sloped area.
For the overlay to apply, comma, revises the criteria for granting a special exception by the ZBA, comma, and other administrative provisions of the overlay. And if I need to change a word or two here or there to make that make grammatical sense, I'll do it. But that's the
gist
sense
of it.
of what I would send to her.
I'm good with that. I don't know if that speaks for anybody else.
It's fine with me.
Okay. So I think this is the first time you've seen this one. So I don't think we need a motion to change it if instead we make the motion to send the version with changes to legal.
So moved. Second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay,
Yeah, good,
Good.
James.
thank you. Nice
Do
work.
we want to do this?
Yep.
Do we want to talk about it?
We do. And I was hoping you would lead this discussion because I'm seeing this for the first time.
Oh, sure. The pre-existing non-conforming seasonal dwellings.
Mhm. We only have a few
this-
of them now.
This is out of, I think this is from Epsom, and I think there was actually a Superior Court decision relative to seasonal dwellings that brought this forward. Under A, purpose and intent, some of the language, and I just received this from Laura a few days ago, but some of the language needs to come out, needs to be tweaked because it's basically Epsom's. Changed the date from 1969 to, I believe it was 1999, but it was adopted in 2000, but I'll check that. The adoption of the zoning ordinance, the current one, the rewrite. We'll have to remove that section within the parameters enumerated within Article 3B. And further down, she said it was fine, we could just eliminate some of the references that are specifically in Epsom's. Seasonal dwelling, it gives a definition, scope of use.
So,
It's a tough thing to try to pin down because you can't really go by a specific time frame, such as, although it does mention that it's presumed to be May 15th through October 30th, but in the real world today, people go ice fishing, they go,
I was gonna say,
you know,
we have
whatever.
friends who have an uninsulated cabin in way up Maine, and they always spend the week between Christmas and New Year's up there.
Mm-hmm. I
That's
think
when the lake is frozen
and I
enough that
don't
they can
know
get across it.
what, right, exactly. I don't know what James' thought may be, but I would like to run it by Laura to add something to the effect of that it is not a person's primary residence.
Yes.
Define it as that, as well as what is in here, or something to that effect. And then in D, just remove the unless relief is granted, and then maybe a period or under, and then on the second page, she also said, if we don't like that one, although I don't see any real concerns other than adding something to the effect of, and is not a permanent residence, I don't know. Ask her to, the best way to word it, or maybe James, if he has time, could go and tweak the language. The other option would be to define seasonal residential and permit it in all districts and require a special exception to convert it or prohibit it, the conversion without a variance. The first page basically does that because anything that doesn't offer the special exception would be through a variance if someone wanted to convert. My concern is this. We have been enforcing the zoning ordinance with our understanding of the language that's in there now. And because of that court case, we need to shore up by having these definitions in there. And because of the fact that we have so many small lots, seasonal around the lakes, that could greatly impact the quality of water of the lake if there was all of a sudden a lot of development from seasonal to year round.
We have had significant development from seasonal.
We do, we have a very significant number. I would suggest that you consider, for at least this year, doing the front page. I think if we were going to try to, unless James has some time available, it would want to try to come up with criteria for a special exception. I think because of the timing we're at now, we need to finalize everything by the work session in order to hold a public hearing in the beginning of January, because everything has to be, there has to be notices done, and we typically want to have the ability to have two public hearings in January, in case we hear enough feedback or it becomes known that maybe there's something in there that needs to be changed. You can have the second public hearing. With that said, if I can put you on the spot and ask you if you could do that tweaking and get it over to Laura before you have any
Other time commitments?
any other time commitments or time off? Is that a possibility, or are you
That
out
is a
straight
possibility.
tomorrow?
I don't have many hours left for tomorrow, so this would be a Monday item.
Okay.
But I am planning to keep working until I get a call. I'm not.
The first child always takes
Planning.
longer, James, so even when she calls you, you can still probably
You can
work
still
another
do
couple
this.
hours.
It's true.
So I am not planning a particular time at which I will no longer be
You
available.
could take a laptop to the hospital.
Yeah, there you go.
You're not going to be doing anything, you're just sitting there.
The reason I was just shuffling through my bag is I actually stumbled on another model of this because I was helping Wakefield with their zoning updates. They just needed some help compiling everything. And I know they have a section on conversion of uses. I think their definition is tied in part to septic, because there's a difference between a seasonal septic approval and a year-round septic approval. Which, if we're talking about loading in the lakes, is the concern.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely is the concern.
Exactly.
But I can't remember any more than that off the top of my head, and I made an effort this week to not be a pack rat and just carry a bunch of papers around with me. So unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me.
Just for my,
If the board was agreeable to allow staff to come up with something that meets this definition that could be added in, and send it to Laura, have it to you for your final decision on all of these on the work session, then we could get ready to do public notices on the ones that,
better.
is that
Yeah.
reasonable?
I'm okay with that.
So
My
to
initial
give James some
impression is
leeway.
that the second page would be the quicker and easier one to do, as opposed to trying to figure out how to fit the first page into our ordinance. But I think some combination of those could be done by then. And I can at least sit down and talk to Jen about this tomorrow, just in case something happens over the
Okay.
weekend.
That would be great.
So she should be able to pick that up.
Perfect.
But just
And the board's satisfied with that?
just so I understand, what is a seasonal septic system?
I think there are different permits based on the intensity of use, and I think I think there is a permit for something that's not intended to be used year round. It may load more in certain times of the year, but if it's going to even out over the long run, I guess there might be different concerns.
You can get by with, well, I can't say definitely, but I know we had an application a while ago, before anybody else was here, where seasonal use seasonal septic consisted of a septic tank,
Oh, okay. that's-
storage tank
that's
that
an
was,
Yeah, okay.
and at the end of the season,
You
they
pump it
pumped
out?
it. You pumped it out, and that was it.
That makes sense. Okay.
And the major problem is without it, if people were to convert from seasonal to year-round, with who knows what, that could be a grandfathered system in there.
Right.
And then you go from, minimal use to
Yeah.
showers, washer, dryers, dishwashers, and all that,
Yep.
It really would add some loading into the,
Right.
the land right.
What did we do when Moonlight Maples became a house? Because that's got a 500-gallon tank, septic. Where Moonlight Maples used to be, across from, on Harvey Lake. Next to the cabins.
They had to have a state-approved design that would accommodate the residential use before the building inspector would allow that occupancy.
Okay, so, but they don't have to install it until there's.
Correct.
Yeah, because I think they were going to be pumping it on the fairly.
Quite
regular-
frequently, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, do you need a motion to allow you to develop that?
I don't think we need a motion. I think if you're all agreeable and
Do it.
James is agreeable, then,
Double check it. Sometimes you do,
and then we
sometimes you
can
don't.
get all of those
Get them all done.
ready for a final vote to go to public hearing.
Exactly. Okay. Anything else on zoning amendments? Thank you for your vote and confidence to allow me to update the CIP, but I did not get to it
Oh, that's fine.
in
It's been
time.
2 weeks.
I was
It's
just
been 2
wondering
weeks
whether
since-
I missed it. Wasn't-
So, I will try to get to it soon, so we have it for files.
Could you just send out the version you have now?
Yes.
Because the budget committee is meeting on Saturday.
Oh, they are?
Yes, but it's not approved. We
I
don't
understand,
want
but
to, we
at
don't
least
want to
like-
distribute it.
It would be last, for the current
I
year,
just like
not
to,
last year.
I just like to be able to see if what some of the things we are talking about are on the list.
Okay.
I mean, at least I'd know.
I can do
I
that.
wouldn't think
I
it
can-
would be appropriate to you.
I mean, if you feel uncomfortable, just
The
only send me
I could
the
do,
names.
I was gonna say, I could send you the description of the project without any cost associated with it.
Yeah, just send me the list of the list of the
Yeah,
names, so at least.
If you have, so the thing that you need to update is the allocation of projects,
Correct,
but we already have project descriptions and how much they cost,
correct,
and you're not changing any of those,
correct.
then I would say you can share the project descriptions and how much they cost, but it's probably not
Yes.
smart to share the allocation draft.
Yeah. And how it was planned and stuff.
I just want to be able to,
Say, yes,
say,
the-
yeah, either this was part of the thought process or not.
yeah, I can do that.
So I mean,
It'll probably just be a screen grab,
yeah,
an
That'd be
image to
fine.
say, here's a list of the projects and the
Yeah.
cost and when they were, that's easy enough to do
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I look at it every time.
by Saturday morning.
No, it's the weather forecast for Dover tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just like I say,
He's
don't
not
do anything to the
going
file other
until
than
at least the
Yes,
4th or
exactly.
5th.
spring print it.
and that won't
Wait a
take long.
minute, today's? They're the 5th, that way he's got all this done for us.
Okay,
And then we can.
Anything else from staff? So double checking, we have a meeting on
You have this, right?
The
December 13th,
13th and the
I have the
27th.
original,
27th.
but if you
Okay.
marked up comments,
There you go. I
that'd
just
be awesome.
took out what obviously didn't apply to us, but.
The 13th and the 27th.
Correct.
Okay,
Our
so,
meetings next month.
so we never changed those, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we had approval of the ballot amendments on the 13th gives us enough notice for public hearing?
If we get them to Laura and they're good to go, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just sort of what I thought. I
I'll
was
double
like,
check. I'll come up
typically-
with a timeline. for
Typically
that.
2
Yeah,
weeks,
a
right? 2
Timeline
weeks
for
after
that.
approval.
You also
for-
don't have to have the hearing in December, right?
Oh, no, it would be
No,
the.
it would be January.
It'd be in January, but I want to have 2 and you have to have 10 days. And what I don't like is the final public hearing can be up to the day that the warrant is being published. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, posted, and we don't, I don't want to be here at 11 o'clock at night trying to,
Now, how were those changes made so we
Yeah.
can get the warrant?
Exactly.
and just as an FYI, we are getting the subdivision for December, the large subdivision off of Route 4 in the western
the-
part.
The Bean Road bit, was it Bean Road?
No, Bean Road's East Northwood.
Oh,
The one that backs up the old turnpike and
Yes.
is on
okay.
Route 4 that
That'll be
they
through
did
December.
receive some special exceptions from the zoning board, and
Merry Christmas.
yes, I was hoping that it wouldn't be the month James was out, but we'll deal with it.
We can always find
And
it.
that's gonna take some time to go through
Oh,
it
yeah.
anyway.
I mean,
We can
May
find
take
it.
depending
a
on
few
how long
months.
that takes, I might at least be able to get the staff report done, or at least sit down
Mhm.
and walk Jen through the staff report and
Yeah.
what happened with it so far.
We can always find it incomplete because our planner isn't here. Or, no, let me see, what is it? We could accept it as complete, but we could say the board is not ready to hear it.
That sounds
Because I think that we
Could do that.
could do that. I'm not advocating for doing that.
or just.
It would not be your fault, it would be our fault.
Draw straws and just don't everybody show up.
So it wouldn't be,
Oh, don't say that on tape.
What?
That'll happen.
Kidding.
Don't, yeah. I know I'll be here on the 27th, I have to work that day, so.
Christmas, who knows what's gonna happen?
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's 4 of us here tonight. We have 2 others who, well, both of whom called in at least, so I can say that is good.
Well, Beth has
Or
the
3.
board, she has,
Yeah, she has a commitment, and
Oh,
Joe
yeah,
called
she
in.
mentioned
I think Joe called in to say he wasn't gonna be here. We just haven't heard from Justin. But, yeah. Okay, one last thing.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, good for you, Betty. I didn't pick up on that, that's what, I thought there was
well,
one
he
more
said
thing.
one
to
last
Sure,
thing,
we
yeah.
No, that's
Second,
what I was waiting for.
nobody's seconding it, I'll
Yeah,
second it.
okay, thank you. We're adjourned at 9:30.